last Sunday, perhaps the biggest story of the Trump administration broke. Special Counsel Robert Mueller found that there was not collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. Attorney General William Barr quoted Mueller's report in a letter he sent to Congress. He said, "The investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or colluded with the Russian government in its election interference activities. This comes after 2 years of thorough investigation. Special Counsel Robert Mueller issued more than 2,800 subpoenas, 500 search warrants, 230 court orders, and conducted approximately 500 interviews with witnesses and requested documents from 13 foreign governments, but again, they did not find evidence of collusion, according to Attorney General Barr's letter. This news has left our country looking for answers. For the last 2 years, Democrats across the spectrum expected to see hard evidence that Trump had been colluding with the Russians to sway the 2016 election. In a 2017 interview, Hillary Clinton made this comment regarding who she thought was responsible for a 2016 disinformation campaign tied with the Russian government.
Who was directing them, from your perspective?
We're getting more information about all of the contacts between Trump campaign officials and Trump associates with Russians before, during, and after the election.
But you're leaning Trump.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes, I'm leaning Trump. I think it's pretty hard not to.
Now, Democrats are left without the evidence they'd hoped for and many questions to be answered. Like, should the Americans trust the Mueller report? Should they trust Anthony Barr's summary of it? And what does the actual report say? They also must face whether or not they should continue to investigate the president or leave it all behind and focus on the policy. Or maybe do both. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi criticized Barr for not immediately releasing the report.
No, thank you, Mr. Attorney General. We do not need your interpretation. Show us the report, and we can draw our own conclusions. We don't need you interpreting for us. It was condescending, it was arrogant, and it wasn't the right thing to do.
Barr said on Friday that he would release the report by mid-April, if not sooner.
So the sooner they can give us the information, the sooner we can all make a judgment about it.
Meanwhile, on the other side, Republicans are basking in what seems to be Trump's biggest victory yet. According to Time magazine, the White House and the RNC are saying that Democrats have been proven totally wrong and President Trump has been exonerated. Trump said this about Mueller's findings earlier this week.
The Mueller report was great. It could not have been better. It said no obstruction, no collusion. It could not have been better.
The report didn't totally exonerate Trump from all charges. He could still be tried for obstruction of justice. It will depend on what the report says when it's released. But Attorney General Anthony Barr said that he would not move forward with such charges against the president based on the evidence that Mueller had within the report. Republicans are also arguing that Mueller's findings show that Democrats have intense partisanship towards the Trump administration and other Republicans. On Thursday, all 9 Republicans on the House Special Committee on Intelligence signed a letter to Democratic Chairman Adam Schiff calling for his resignation. Representative Mike Conaway, who is a member of the committee, read the letter aloud.
In any way by hostile foreign power. Your willingness to continue to promote a demonstrably false narrative is alarming. The findings of the special counsel conclusively refute your past and present assertions and have exposed you as having abused your position to knowingly promote false information, having damaged the integrity of this committee and undermined the faith in the United States government and its institutions. Your actions, both past and present, are incompatible with your duty as chairman of this committee, which alone in the House of Representatives has the obligation and authority to provide effective oversight of the U.S. intelligence community. As such, we have no faith in your ability to discharge your duties in a manner consistent with your constitutional responsibility and urge your immediate resignation as chairman of the committee. Mr. Chairman, this letter is signed by all 9 members of the Republican side of the House, of the committee, and I ask unanimous consent.
The government, if not our country, seems to be in disarray. I spoke with Mike Murphy, the director of the Center for the Political Future at USC, about the report and what effects it might have on the country moving forward, especially in light of the 2020 election. Here's our conversation. The Mueller report, or at least parts of findings about it, came out on Sunday. What are your feelings so far on what we have?
Well, I think there was no collusion proven, and I think a lot of Bob Mueller. I think he did the best possible and the fairest investigation there could be. He did clearly state that the evidence shows the Russians did try to interfere in our election, which is a huge assault on our democracy, and how the president and other elected leaders respond to that, I think is a very, very important thing. And even though I'm a conservative Republican, I've been very disappointed in how President Trump has responded to that. Now, we cover politics now, particularly on cable television, like the final 3 minutes of a highly competitive basketball game. So there are a lot of emotional highs and lows as people on either side of the question sit screaming at their television. So I believe on the anti-Trump side, where I am, there was a lot of, I would say emotional pain because the expectations were way too high that somehow the Mueller report would lead to the president being thrown out of office in handcuffs in a week, and that was never realistic. So I think if you step back from the emotionalism of the moment and the sensationalism, you can see a report that said, well, there was no direct collusion. The question of whether or not the president tried to obstruct justice, a serious charge, is still up in the air. There was no proof not, and some questions yes, and Mueller basically punted it, and Trump appointee Barr, I think, gave a favorable spin to the Trump point of view, but there are going to be a lot more investigations into that as well as other things. So this is the first or second inning, and I think people ought to look at the long game.
So it's been this 2-year-long roller coaster, and now you're saying that's only the second inning. But how are moderate voters feeling now that all of this time has been spent on the investigation and little or no evidence of collusion has been found? What impact does that have on moderate voters going into the 2020 elections?
I think this entire Mueller process has been tremendous chum for the 5% of the country, maybe 10%, including the media, who are fanatics for the day-to-day drama of this inside Beltway stuff. I don't think the Mueller report coming out either saying no collusion or saying there was evidence of collusion would have had much of an impact out in the real world, because people who like Trump would not have believed it, and people who don't like Trump would have just said, see, we told you. So I never thought this thing would be a huge number mover. I think the president is unpopular, and most moderate voters don't like him, which is why the Republicans got thrown out of the Congress. Voters wanted to punish Trump. But that election was not about the Mueller report. It was about middle-class economics and frustration at the president for his behavior. So even though the media covers the Mueller report every day like it's the Hindenburg, it's in their interest, particularly on television, to do that, to kind of entertain people and get ratings and revenue. I don't think it has as big of an impact as people thought it would before, nor the great impact for Trump they're assuming it has now, because it didn't say he was guilty of collusion. But I think elections move on larger things, and I think it did not help the president, nor did it hurt him. I don't think much changed.
So do you not think that this will be an important issue headed into the 2020 election?
No. I think Trump's character and his conduct as president will be an issue. And this Mueller report and the Russia question is part of that, particularly the Russia question of how he responded to the fact that Mueller found, which is the Russians tried to subvert our democracy. That's all part of the set of issues. But whether or not there was direct collusion or not, and what the investigation found, is it's a disappointment to Trump opponents, because they wanted the headlines, they wanted the criticism of Trump emotionally. But in the real calculus of what voters decide a year and a half from now, I think it'll be one argument of very many that drive their decision.
And if Democrats continue to investigate on the Mueller investigation, do you think that could have an impact leading up to the election, or is it just more of the same and doesn't really matter again?
Well, I think it matters on an ethical level. The report ought to be made public. And I think it will, because I think it'll get subpoenaed by the Democratic committees in the House. But presidential elections don't tend to turn on complicated Washington investigations and the food fight over what page 98 says or not, unless there's a huge headline with Trump taking a bag of diamonds from Putin or something. We did not find that kind of collusion that might have broke it through into a big election issue. D.C. investigation fights are millions of column inches and a lot of noise, but out in voter land, they're a secondary thing.
And if there was one thing that you could point to as what you think will be the most significant part of the upcoming election, what would it be?
The economy. It'll be a referendum on whether people like Trump's style and his actions, or they want to fire him. In every election since Trump was elected, they've been hostile to Trump. Maybe he can change that. And people's perception, not always the reality, but the perception of how the economy is treating them. Their wages, interest rates, things like that. Those, I think, will be the big issues in the last month of the election. The other issue that could be big, but is not now, is foreign policy if there is a world crisis or something like that. But barring something like that coming in, I think it'll be a referendum on the president's behavior and how he's functioned in office and how people perceive the meat and potato issues of the economy.
Well, thank you so much. It was nice to have
Thank
you
you.
on. Again, that was Mike Murphy, the co-director of the Center for the Political Future at the University of Southern California. And while the investigations into Donald Trump's activities involving the Russians may not have had a huge impact on the way Americans voted in 2018, it will likely stay an issue in the news. Since Barr's letter was released, many 2020 Democratic candidates have commented on the issue.
The Mueller report must be made public. All of it.
Now, I don't know what's in that report, but I do know that Mueller wound up indicting 34 people, including 6 Trump campaign officials.
You have a president who, in my opinion, beyond the shadow of a doubt, sought to, however ham-handedly, collude with the Russian government, a foreign power, to undermine and influence our elections.
We just heard from Democratic Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, Robert Beto O'Rourke, and Senator Bernie Sanders. I wouldn't expect this news to cool down anytime soon. It's likely that Trump will use it as a key issue heading into the 2020 campaign, and of course, many of the Democrats will continue to push for further investigations into Trump and his associates. I'll be here and on my weekly segment over at uscannonburgmedia.com breaking down the country's most imminent political and policy issues with some of the country's brightest minds. So be sure to check back and subscribe at theedgeofideas.com and head over to the USC Annenberg Media to check out some of my latest work. And remember, listen carefully, think critically, and conclude thoughtfully. I'm Luke Scorzel, and you are listening to Bills.